It's lights out, everybody, and welcome back to the Low Downforce podcast, the For Friend Formula One podcast. Once again, you have just the lads. J9 is just returning from vacation, getting settled. She was out of the country for a month, so who can blame her? F1 summer break, full effect. But we'll have her back very soon. But for now, you got the lads. You've got Matt, you've got Josh, and you have myself, Ben. J9 didn't miss a whole lot. I'm gonna put that right up front before we get into our reviews of the Italian Grand Prix. Of course, we were at Monza, the Temple of Speed, and it certainly lived up to that name. We'll talk more about that in a second. But as we always do to start off, I want to jump right in. Matt, I'm going to jump to you first. 1 through 10, or as we've seen already, 0 through 10. What are you rating this race?
No, honestly, I give it a 5.5. It was mediocre. We did get to see a little bit of the McLaren drama, which just makes it exciting, to be honest. I mean, that's some Drive to Survive material right there. But also, this is the fastest race ever at that 1:13:24. That's 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 24 seconds for Max Verstappen. And Lando Norris setting the fastest lap at Monza ever with average speed of 257.781 kilometers per hour for you Americans like me. I guess 160.19 miles per hour. That's insanely fast. So there's some excitement there. I'm not going to give it a 0. How about y'all?
Yeah, I'm gonna go like half of that. I don't know. I'll give it like a 3.5 or a 4. Like the off track drama was more like, I guess off track being just like McLaren arguing with each other was more entertaining than I feel like the actual race. Like there were a few things that happened here and there, but overall just not a great race. And you did mention Norris having the fastest lap in the race. Max Verstappen set the record in qualifying because he was on pole. And that's also the fastest F1 qualifying lap ever at any track because they have really quick lap times.
It's just the fastest F1 lap ever, which I think is interesting. I respect and appreciate that the metric they use for that is like fastest average speed because as we know, tracks are different lengths, different characteristics. There's no way you can compare any one track lap time to another, but the average speed over 260 kilometers per hour, over 161 miles per hour. Absolutely nuts. I like this race the least, I guess, of the three of us. I went for a 2 out of 10. We'll talk about the McLaren drama. We know it was there. My only problem with it, or why it doesn't really affect my result, is you could have watched the first 5 laps of the race. You'd have seen all the action. And McLaren drama or not, because it didn't result in really any like effective position change, you could have turned off after lap 5 and you would have gotten more or less the gist. So maybe to its credit, Matt, it was the fastest race in F1 history, so it was over as quickly as it started, fortunately. But yeah, we might as well, before we get into kind of all of our track takes, kind of our breakdown of the McLaren situation, I'll kick it to Josh, our race recap, just the fact sheet, if you will.
Yeah, so Max Verstappen with the win, like we said. Lando 2, Oscar 3. A little drama between the two of them that we'll surely get into. Charles Leclerc 4, George Russell 5. Lewis Hamilton back up to 6th after his 5-place grid penalty to start. Alexander Albon in 7th, Bortoleto 8. Kimi Antonelli 9th, getting some home points, and Isaac Hadjar 10th. Carlos Sainz just missing out. We had 2 retirements, Fernando Alonso and Nico Hülkenberg. Nico didn't even start the race because he had an issue with his car, and Fernando Alonso had a suspension issue and had to retire from the race. Penalties, Behrman got a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Sainz, I believe.
Yep.
And Kimi Antonelli got a 5-second time penalty for driving erratically. And I think that was all I had written down.
I was going to say, I know there was also the Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda crash.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember.
But he gave the place back, as did Max and Lando. Max gave the place back to Lando after turn 1, where Max cut the corner.
I think
even with
unless you mentioned it, just Ocon, right?
Yeah, did he get a penalty?
It was no penalty points, but a 5-second time penalty.
Oh, yep. I did have that one written down. I just didn't say it.
I will say
he pushed Stroll off the road.
If you're interested in penalties and you're interested in interesting racing, go watch the F2 race at the Italian Grand Prix. It was some of the most carnage I've seen. It was
that's every F2 race
nightmare. This one especially, though, was insane. So if you're looking for action, you feel like you didn't get it from the F1 Italian Grand Prix, check out the feature race from the Formula 2 series. But as we said, as we alluded to, really, since Max ran away with the win, so notably so, that is the largest margin of victory we've had all season. So we've talked about McLaren being by far the best car. I think it's pretty understood that Max Verstappen is the best driver. So when he gets the setup he needs, he absolutely ran away with it, just under 20 seconds across the line, ahead of Lando Norris. But as we hinted at, Lando Norris only in second because McLaren asked Oscar Piastri to give a position back after sequential pit stops right at the end of the race. Oscar Piastri, and this deserves to get recognized because it got missed in the chaos. Oscar's pit was the fastest of the season, a 1.91 second pit stop for McLaren. So credit where credit's due, and then a lap later immediately take away all that credit because the left tire gunner didn't bolt the tire front left on all the way on Lando. Lando has a 4-second slower stop, 5.9 second total. So instead of position staying the same, Lando winds up after qualifying P2, staying pretty much in the race in P2, no worse than that at least. They wind up swapping positions back so that they finish kind of as they were before the pit stop. And that brings out, of course, the drama of bad pit stops happen.
Remember when I said McLaren was sabotaging Lando Norris? Here it is. They ended up making up for it, but they're trying to mess him up.
I don't think so. He got the position back. It's a very confusing.
Took team orders.
Yeah, I will say though, like watching the replay of the pit stop was so painful because the gunner got the wheel most of the way in, but not all the way in, and then just sat there. And one of the other pit crew guys had to like tap him and be like, finish the wheel. And then it was out there, which it was a mess. It's one of those things, like I said in my review of the race, like all of this drama, but nothing really changed as expected. Like you can say that the way it unfolded was stupid. I 100% agree. You obviously don't plan for a bad pit stop. It's unfortunate that it happened that way, but I think it would also be stupid to say that swapping back or the end result was unfair. How about that? The swapping was weird, but I don't think you can say it after the race that Lando didn't deserve P2 after the weekend.
It's part of racing.
No, actually,
he got unlucky.
Yeah, I think it's actually a coin toss, to be honest. It really depends on how you see it, because if you're looking at Oscar's chances for the World Drivers' Championship, I know that like there was a mention, okay, this is somewhat like Hungary, where the position was given back. Here's the thing, just like Josh just said and Oscar said, it is racing. I think that what could mitigate the whole issue of whether or not it was fair is I don't think Lando should have. They shouldn't have pit Oscar first. Like,
well, Lando was the one.
Lando made the decision.
Yeah, but McLaren ultimately has the authority on that, right? So the pit wall, I think, is really the deciding factor here, where Oscar and Lando are both just driving the best they can, and Lando had a suggestion. And if you think about it, if there was a safety car, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe Max would have tried to come in and grab some softs or something, and Lando could have stuck it out. So there's some merit to Lando's thinking there, but again, it comes back down to the pit wall.
I think it's also one of those things, just the situation of this year. We've been saying it since almost the beginning of the season. Constructors' Championship is so locked up for McLaren. And I said this after the last race review with Lando's DNF at the Dutch Grand Prix, that the championship from the driver's side was effectively over. I think McLaren also, maybe in some of the decision making in deciding to actually swap them back, it was only a 3-point difference as opposed to 1 and 2, which would have been 7 points. As a Lando fan, I don't think this 3 points makes a difference in the championship. I don't see anything from Oscar that suggests that Lando's going to, even it was 34, now it's 31. I don't see Lando chipping away a net 32 points.
I think that's part of why Oscar gave the position back so easily, because he knew it was only a 3-point difference and not a 7-point gap.
Very easily,
it is a 6-point
not
difference,
giving it back and just taking it to
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because Oscar would have had 37 on Lando had he kept the position. So, I mean, it was either going to be 37 or 31. But either way, again, like you guys are saying, it's not that big of a difference. I still think, though, it also does kind of just, I don't know why they wouldn't give it back to Oscar in favor. They can't necessarily claim a number one driver. And I think that that's something that McLaren's been dealing with a lot. We've talked about it on the podcast here about who gets to be the number one driver, who gets the preferential treatment. And Lando's gotten it in the past, right? And some people that I saw in reaction to the race thought that Lando was getting some preferential treatment. Again, here, yeah, the undercut was unintentional, but it is racing.
It is, though. Like it's crazy how much the internet obviously blows everything to max proportion. That immediately the internet is like, McLaren hate Oscar. They love,
do. Yeah,
it's so interesting. I'll get into my track take in a second. That we have to remember, it is a team sport. There are a lot of, and I have to remind you, there's thousands of people that work in McLaren, and all of their professional working like compensation bonuses are tied to the constructors championship. So in terms of man hours, this sport is very much a team sport. Very much most of the people making the magic happen are more interested in the team doing well than a specific driver. Of course, though, the glory, the fame, the spotlight is on the individual drivers, the individual racers, and that's why the Drivers' Championship means so much. But right into my track take, I'm locking in as we're kind of reaching the last third of the season. We've got 8 races left, so exactly a third left of the season, that the Constructors' Championship is more important for F1 enjoyment than the Drivers' Championship. And that's exactly why 2025 has not lived up to what we got in 2024. And of course, grass is always greener. We only get to appreciate things once they're past. I think now that we are this point in the season, 2024 was a phenomenal season. There were 7 winners across 4 teams. There were 10 different podium getters across 5 teams when you count the 2 Alpine drivers in Brazil in the wet last year. But it's also on principle. It's part of the reason that even the Drivers' Championship is a little tricky this year, is 4 drivers can influence a constructor's battle. 2 drivers on 2 teams going at it. You only need 2 for that to happen, and you usually only get 2, if any, in the drivers. So McLaren is so far ahead that it's only really Oscar and Lando fighting. And as a result, we don't get 15, 20-point swings unless we have like a Lando DNF or Oscar first race of the season getting stuck in the grass briefly in Australia. We don't get the end of last year where Lando will pull out a win, the Ferraris will grab the rest of the podium, and Oscar will be in 4th, and all of a sudden there's a big difference there. And so if you want top to bottom excitement, I mean, go look at the midfield this year. Go look at Ferrari versus Mercedes. There are a lot of important race results that aren't immediately at the front that are very interesting, worth the attention, don't get the attention because the spotlight's always on the Drivers' Championship. But I think for F1 enjoyment, for fan watching week in, week out, you'd rather a Constructors' Championship battle than a Drivers' Championship battle.
I'm going to yellow flag that. And I think the part I agree with is I think people care more about the drivers, but I think the Constructors' Championship being close means there are more cars, aka more drivers, that are in competition. Like this year, there's 3 cars that are competing for race win, or 3 drivers, excuse me. There's 2 teams that have a capable car. And if like last year, there were 4 different teams that were capable of winning races, which means there were 8 drivers that were like in that fight to be competitive in any given race. And I think because there are fewer cars in the constructors, it makes the drivers less interesting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think a green flag on this. I don't know. There's something about, like you mentioned, Ben, the fact that we're looking at like those 3 drivers, right? And I do think that 2024 was a bit more exciting. That being said, again, it all really depends on what team you root for, right? And us being McLaren fans, the 2 of us, it is getting to be pretty boring when we just have one or the other or both on the podium. Week in, week out, we've had so many 1-2s. It's not as exciting. And I do think that the battle is more exciting in the midfield, but that's where, again, like you're not really too concerned about which Alpine is ahead in the drivers, right? Whether or not they're doing well as a team, I think is more interesting. I don't know if that made sense, but I also think that for my track take, I looked at the midfield and say, like, I don't know. I am really sad about this, but Carlos Sainz is not having the redemption arc that I thought he would. And that's my track take, is that I think this most recent clash and his recent performance is showing that Sainz is fighting for scraps. He's not even getting close to the podium. He's not nearly as good as his partner in Alexander Albon. So I guess I could also ask you guys, is Sainz wasted out at Williams, or is this his new level, or is he just totally just restricted by the car?
I'm going to green flag your original statement of he hasn't performed as we expected. I'm going to red flag that last point, though, of is he wasted? And I think the thing that's saving Carlos in some ways is Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton
I was about to make the same
swapped
point.
teams and really struggled. And I think it's hard as fans, and I think the reason that fans are so critical is we don't have a mechanism. We don't have a way to understand when Lewis says the Ferrari drives totally different than a Mercedes, because for us it's just, oh, this car's faster than this car. Like, you should be able to adjust. And we don't realize, maybe Josh, from driving in the simulator, when you take assists off, like how sensitive these cars are, and that, why when drivers talk about driving style, why it matters so much. And some reporters and some articles have come out about how like Lewis Hamilton's like braking style doesn't work in the Ferrari car as well as Charles Leclerc's braking style. But that's hard for us to view as a fan. I think Alex Albon, on one hand, is making Carlos Sainz look bad. There was also a lot of questions about, is Alex Albon all that? I think we can definitively say absolutely. He's the lead midfield driver. We'll get to that in a second, Josh. Let me finish
I'm not gonna.
But I think it also helps Carlos in the long run, because Alex is proving, okay, this Williams is getting better. Right now, they are leading the midfield battle. They are 5th in the Constructors' Championship. And so Williams is making the improvements that I assume was promised to Carlos Sainz when they signed the contract. The bigger thing, and I think it's nice that we get this right away, is next year is one of the largest regulation changes in history. Engine, car, downforce, all of that changing. And so even the veteran drivers, the Lando versus Oscar, the Max versus any 10-second drivers at Red Bull, Leclerc versus Hamilton, you're going to see even the veterans having to learn and adjust and get used to this new car. And so I think we'll get a better picture of competitive balance in teams when everybody has to start new next year. So that's something to look forward to for sure.
For sure, yeah, and that's why I asked the question. Like, my take is that this is not what we expected, or at least what I expected, and I was hoping for more. But that, I did want to know what y'all think of that.
Yeah, I kind of gonna agree with mostly with what Ben said, and Lewis has said especially that he's been with a Mercedes engine, even when he was at I think when he was at McLaren way back in the day, they were also Mercedes.
I think so.
And so switching to a Ferrari engine, like the feel of the car is entirely different, and I think when you're switching engine suppliers, especially because like drivers, George Russell went from a Williams to a Mercedes, but Williams is the sister team, so they're using a Mercedes engine. So I think there's not as big of a jump. And I think when you're switching between engine suppliers as a driver, I think there's a much bigger adjustment period.
It is an interesting point if you think about it. Charles Leclerc was at Alfa Romeo, used a Ferrari engine before. Like, when you actually think about it, there's not that many driver swaps in recent times, notable driver swaps on the level of Lewis Hamilton or Carlos Sainz, where, like you said, Josh, it's not just team switching, but it's engine switching.
It's old Red Bull drivers that get kicked out of that seat, like Alex Albon, like Carlos Sainz when they were like much younger.
I think they love
and then
anything
they have to,
anything that isn't Red Bull at that point.
Yeah. And the reason I was saying that Alex Albon might not be the best of the rest drivers is just he's been in that car for a while. Like, he is probably getting the maximum out of that Williams, but like potentially a different driver paired with a different car that suits their style better would be a better driver. So I feel like it's hard to if you're comparing just the driving skill, it kind of has to be paired with the car they're
Albon certainly hasn't hurt himself this year.
Absolutely not. Like he is carrying Williams this year. Like I agree entirely that Carlos Sainz has completely underperformed.
Yeah, this is the most. Or sorry, they scored more in this season than they have the past 7 combined, I believe.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a sec, maybe when we get to top or flops. But Josh, we still have your track take before we get there. We can't jump the gun just yet.
Yeah, I'm going to say that Ferrari is like the worst team that's going to finish P2 in the constructors in a long time. Ferrari is not going to come close to challenging for a race win this year. Like, we occasionally get a podium, but McLaren is clearly the best team, and then Mercedes and Red Bull are both driving with one capable driver. So I feel like Ferrari is just kind of not doing anything great, and they're just going to easily get P2.
I'm red flagging this. I disagree, at least the statement of they're the worst P2 team ever. I think the way you look at it
recently.
I think the way you look at it, though, is, I mean, they took the gamble, obviously, on complete car changes. I think we'll get the total judge after the regulation change, because if they're the best team next year, then it was worth it. I think
we're always the best team next year.
I think, hey, next year's our year, TM, you know? But I think that McLaren is making good teams and good drivers look bad this year. They're that far ahead. But if you went through all of the standings and took out the McLaren drivers, you would have multiple Charles Leclerc wins. You'd have Max Verstappen wins. You'd have George Russell wins. I think that what's getting lost is Ferrari is still beating Mercedes, who
they're 5th and 6th in the drivers. Like, George Russell is pulling Mercedes by himself. Verstappen is pulling Red Bull by himself, and neither.
But we also just said, per Matt's hot take, that Lewis Hamilton is more of a non-factor than we expected.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
of that change. But then if you look at it, Leclerc has had some great performances. I mean,
yeah,
he's what, a 10.5 in qualifying away from winning Monaco. He's put in good Ferrari performances. You just have to adjust what a good performance is this year. Not getting wins hurts, but if your best expectation, like for the engineers, for the simulators, is P3 because you're assuming that McLaren's going to go 1-2, Ferrari's achieved that a couple times this year. So they've definitely maximized a couple. It just doesn't feel as great as last year when Charles is grabbing a couple wins, Carlos Sainz then at Ferrari was grabbing a couple wins, that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think I'm going to have to just yellow flag in middle of the road, because here's the thing. If I was just kind of browsing through some of the last seasons, outside of 2023, I think you have a very fair point. But 2023 was a standout season where I believe it was like 40. The second team had 44% of the first. And then here we're seeing 47% is like the ratio, I think, or maybe that's flip-flop, but it's very, very similar to that 2023 season. If you eliminate 2023, I'd say green flag. This is by far the biggest difference in outside of that 2023 season that we've seen in quite a few years. So it is going to make them stand out as being low for P2, but I don't think that they're going to be necessarily the worst. I think this is just a very McLaren dominant season.
The other thing too, right?
Yeah.
It's the context of it all. Ferrari had a chance to win the constructors at the last race last year. Of course, again, they were the ones who had to do the climbing. McLaren just had to run a good race at the end and they would have been fine. And so then when you're like, oh, over a season where, thousands of points are awarded, only losing the constructors by 16, and then going to one season later and you don't even have half the points of the team head, then it stings. Even a couple years back, 2022, Charles is leading the championship a third of the way into the season. I remember one of the first races I watched, not the first, but one of, was Charles at the Spanish Grand Prix. He was leading by like 30-something seconds, engine failure. Max winds up winning the race, and that was effectively the beginning of the end. Max goes on, destroys that championship, destroys 2023, as we know, the most dominant individual driver performance ever. 2024, Charles is kind of on the outskirts of the Drivers' Championship, but very much him and Carlos Sainz in it for the constructors at the end. It's just they show the signs of being the best, but not long enough to get any meaningful trophy out of it, and then they drop off. And the problem is every time you get this drop off, it's like, what happened?
Then you got to hit the reset button, and this year, just neither driver feels like they're good enough to compete. And as a team, they're like doing fine, but each driver, they both feel subpar, even though they put in occasional good performances. Where in the past, both drivers have been good, even if they're not consistent, if that makes sense.
It feels miraculous now that Lewis won the sprint race in China at the beginning of the year. And
yeah.
Ferrari has no other trophy of any kind to show. I guess
we got some
pole awards. You got some pole awards. But I mean, top step.
Oh, yeah.
But speaking of top step, we should get into our tops and flops of the weekend. Of course, we got to put some people down. But first, we're going to celebrate a couple people. I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to get right into mine. I'm going Alex Albon. Is he great? Is he good? Is he average? Josh, I'll let you decide as we go. But Williams used to be a rocket ship, and on the straights at least. And that was good for a place like Monza. The only downside of becoming a better car as a whole is you don't look that great. So Alex Albon stuck with P14 in qualifying, one position behind his teammate. But he's the one, he goes the alternate or at least the flipped strategy of starting on the hards, switching to the mediums instead of what most of or all of the front runners did, starting on the mediums. He goes from 14th to 7th position, making up 7 places in the race, which gives him another 6 points on the season, which brings him up to 70 points on the year. He is having an outstanding year, but 70 is even more impressive when Kimi Antonelli finished this race 2 positions behind him in P9, which means Alex Albon is now P7 in the Drivers' Championship, ahead of one of the Mercedes drivers. And we've talked about Kimi Antonelli's struggles, especially in the European summer, but this is no small feat. We haven't seen a driver not on the top 4 teams in the constructor finish in the top 8 in the Drivers' Championship since Fernando Alonso kind of carried the first half of his 2021 season through the rest of that season. This is a big deal. We talked about it before. The big 3, the big 4. We're so surprised about Hülkenberg podiums, about Hadjar podiums, because they're not supposed to happen. It's not just, oh, there's 3 good drivers and the midfield is fighting for it. Every year, especially in the era we're in now, there's 4 teams, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes. There are 4 teams, which means 8 drivers who, in theory, should finish ahead of the midfield every single race, which, again, of course, it doesn't happen. Some drivers disappoint. There's DNFs, there's accidents, all kinds of chaos happens. That's the beauty of the sport. As they say, that's why you play the game. The game isn't won on paper, of course, but I don't think we should understate that a midfield driver in P7 in the Drivers' Championship is not a small feat, especially in this era. So credit where credit's due.
Nice. I like that. Speaking of the kind of situation with Antonelli, I went for Isaac Hadjar as my top. I think the rookie resilience is there. Started in the pit lane, ended up in P10. It was, I think, his first time going out in Q1 all year, and he still was able to grab points from it. I'm really impressed. I think it was my track take last week about him, possibly catching up to Antonelli. I don't know how likely that is, but I do think that he stands a really good chance of still just being a really standout driver. And Antonelli aside, I think, he's on his way to being the best rookie outside of Antonelli, especially for some of those midfield teams. I know Bortoletto's been showing more signs of life, and Behrman's had his ups and downs, but I'm really impressed with Hadjar. And I like his, this is a cleaner race, and he's slowly and quietly adding those consistent small points.
I hard agree. I mean,
yeah, he's been good.
I think everybody's favorite podium this year is going to be Nico Hülkenberg's podium, obviously having the streak for the most races without a podium. But in some ways, Hadjar's might be more impressive because there was less luck involved. It was just Lando's DNF, but qualifying fourth in a V-carb, holding that position and moving up when a DNF in front of him happened, it was almost like he deserved to be there. Hülkenberg, we love him up there. A lot of things had to go right for him to get there. Hadjar only needed the one position, so he is definitely impressive. Because I think also he was much further down on all of our radars coming into the season in terms of what we knew about the rookies, what we thought they could do. So he's definitely overachieving.
And my top is going to be Max Verstappen. I don't think we're giving him enough credit for how dominant he was. The Red Bull without him would be one of, if not the worst cars on the grid. And he just took it. He qualified on pole and won the race by a wide margin. He had that little incident at the beginning where he cut the corner, had to give the first to Lando, but then he got it back. And Red Bull took maybe a risk and went with the low downforce setup, which they've been, I guess, decent at this year.
Shout out.
Yeah. And he was slow in the corners, but he was fast enough on the straights to just run away with it. And he had, after lap 4 or whenever he took the lead back, he had an incredibly boring race, and it was just calm dominance that we haven't really seen from Max very often this year, as often as we used to.
But I would say none of that lack of dominance is because of Max. It's obviously because of Red Bull in the car. But
yeah.
You can tell how dominant it was because people aren't talking about, Lando bottled the lead when he got it. The end result shows that it was inevitable. And obviously we talked about it on the top of this episode. Josh, like you said, he took pole position with the fastest lap in Formula One history. On this weekend, definitely the fastest car, but were any of us expecting it with how Red Bull's been doing? Probably not. So, I mean, goats are going to goat, right?
Yeah. He's still a freak.
I knew somebody would pick him. I mean, he is just a really well-deserved P1 in this. I don't like saying that, but it's true.
He was so good that J9 got her P1 prediction correct, but her hot take wrong because you didn't really have to overtake anybody because he was already in first to start the race.
Yeah.
I thought it was a double DNF.
That was half of it.
Yeah.
Which didn't come true.
Yeah.
The other half was Max making a good move, which he did. But
I'm getting ahead of myself though. We always conclude
good point.
We always conclude with our own predictors championship update, but we gotta knock people a couple pegs down. There are a couple flops this weekend. Josh, I'm kicking it right back to you. Who let you down this weekend?
I'm going to say Kimi Antonelli just because I predicted him to be top 5 and he finished 9th. And he just kind of hasn't really been very good all year, I feel like.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to
kind of underachieved.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to check this stat in time, but his P9 here might be his best European result this season.
I will be able to check that while you're saying your flop.
It's rough. I would say, because obviously in the middle of the summer, there's the 1 week break to go to Canada where he gets his only career podium. But he is, DNFs left and right, penalties dropping him out of the points. He has not had a stunner, but we'll kick it to Matt while you're looking that up, Josh. Matt, who sucked? Straight up.
I don't, that's not how I want to phrase it. But to just keep it with the theme of rookies, even though Ollie finished P12, I'm surprised he's getting so close to being banned for one race. I mean, he's got 10 points now on his license. And I just think that when you may expect maybe not the cleanest racing from rookies, but at the same time, I would think, you're getting into F1, you have this big chance, and I don't know if it was me in that seat, I'd try to make some clean races, and I wouldn't be happy with being the one at fault. If somebody was to spin me out, okay, the DNF is not necessarily the biggest of deals, but seeing a rookie in this position where he might actually, there's a legitimate chance he could get a race ban, that just kind of did it for me. Where I want to see these rookies pull out these clean laps like Hadjar is doing, like Antonelli has done for a lot of it, not every time. But that was just kind of a letdown. I didn't really think that anyone huge flopped on this, except for maybe Aston Martin. But
I think there's and I think this goes back to what Josh also said about Kimi Antonelli. And I think Kimi's a little bit different, but I think that there's increasing pressure to deliver results right away. We've seen contracts terminated early. In Antonelli's case, I think it's insane if Mercedes was going to sign him as opposed to, like, say he goes to like a Williams. The fact that they put him on a 1-year deal, like the amount of pressure, and I don't think anybody would fault Mercedes now and be like, oh, maybe you do let him go to one of the lower teams or a reserve driver for a year before coming back up. But I mean, Kimi Antonelli is trying to match his pace to George Russell, who's one of the faster drivers on the grid. And every time he drifts a little further away, he feels like he has to try a little bit harder to make up that time. And it's true with Behrman. It's true with, I mean, we talk about Hadjar being great now, literally spinning out formation lap in Australia to start his career. There's immense pressure. We hear it a lot from some of the former drivers of, this is the most competitive Formula One has ever been. With Hadjar's podium in the Dutch Grand Prix last race, now 75%, 15 of the 20 drivers on the grid have at least a podium, which, again, we talked about how there's the big four. We talked about how the sport works. That's insane. It shows just how good it is and how hard, and why we were so excited about Cadillac coming next year. Even though they're bringing in 2 veteran drivers, at least there's 22 spots now as opposed to 20 because there's more talent than there are positions. But one of those
You were right about Kimi Antonelli, by the way. This was his best European finish.
That's rough. That is absolutely rough. Well, hey, even if he leaves the sport after this year, Josh, you and I will be able to say maybe we saw his only podium in Formula One.
I think he'll stick around. I think he'll have an adjustment.
But I mean, it's just low confidence. Like, he's got to figure a way to get the pressure back. Another person who's got to figure it out, who is not one of the podium sitters on the grid, is Liam Lawson. And my only note in my flop is stop fucking crashing into people. And I know they're not all of his fault, but I feel like every race, I mean, he's had a couple really good performances. I think it was Austria. He had like a P6. He like really, really stood out. But it was almost, I saw a lot of kind of Williams Twitter, if you will, kind of stood up this week because we had the debate, reviewing the Dutch Grand Prix of, I wasn't sure if Carlos Sainz actually deserved the penalty in that incident, and enough so that Williams did, before the Italian Grand Prix, lodge a formal complaint to at least get the penalty points off of Carlos Sainz's license for that, at least. But I saw a lot of Williams fans being like, oh yeah, maybe it probably was Liam Lawson's fault because look, what is another race, another crash? Like, what do you know? Like, it's one of those things where it kind of got memed at the beginning, but when he was fighting with like Checo Perez and Fernando Alonso, where he had a quote saying like, I'm not here to make friends. And it feels like even when he's found his groove, he never deviates too far from that because he just seems to keep getting in trouble. And yeah, I think now we've talked about the regulation change. It's a weird year now, but especially when teams are really going for the development battle in the new regulations and stuff like that, crashes are going to be super detrimental in the cost cap era. They're going to reduce how many upgrades you can bring, things like that. And so he's another driver that's got to figure it out and figure it out fast. Maybe finish this year on a clean race, if you will, to wrap it up. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, he does have 6 penalty points, which, just like reflecting on my comments about Ollie, Max has 9. But OP is actually, Oscar Piastri's tied with Liam. So I'm not defending him, just saying that if it was really all his fault.
Something in the Australia, New Zealand water, I guess. Gets them boys racking up points out there. But going from the bad points to the good points. Josh, how did we do with the Predictors Championship predictions this
Definitely
week?
not the worst we've ever had, but all 4 of us got 1 point. So the gaps between us don't change. J9 had Verstappen, like you mentioned earlier, winning the race. The rest of us had Norris P2. And that was the only thing all of us got right. Nobody got their hot takes. And so I still have 31 points in the lead. Matt, 30 right behind. J9, 24. And Ben still lagging behind. But with a third of the season left, I think it's still close enough
We're doing
to
fine.
be anybody's game.
We can still Michael Massey it if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, if you want to change
new
the
fans,
rules.
look up Michael Massey. See how
Abu
he's
Dhabi
contributed-
2021.
See how he's contributed to Formula One in recent years. Of course, that is infamous.
We should bring him
hopefully,
back. He would make this year exciting. Like he would.
We're not even going to get into the steward issues that we've gotten throughout this year and the consistency we're lacking there. But maybe with a little bit of luck, we will be able to bring our own Predictors Championship all the way down to the wire. Despite all the drama, Lando slightly closes the Drivers' Championship gap down to 31 points. So we're still holding out hope that it might be within a race victory come the end of the season. So we get a championship battle all the way down to the end. But regardless, we're going to be covering the whole season, baby. Race in, race out. We do have a week off because the teams are recouping and then heading to Baku in Azerbaijan. An epically cool race, an epically cool track. Goes around the castle, which not many can say. So you will want to tune in for that. We will get you, of course, a preview episode before then. But until then, everybody, stay speedy. Goodbye.